These are like young Black professionals who are extremely influential in their circles. They're killing it in their full time jobs, working at top companies and things like that. You guys will actually be great ambassadors for art collecting in general, but you would make phenomenal art collectors, period.
Super. Okay, Fola, welcome to Money Bites. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for inviting me.
You have a very interesting career, something not typical that we see in the tech sector. So I'm super excited to see and hear how you progressed in your career or even found your career. So before we start, could you give a one-line intro of yourself?
Sure. My name is Fola. Adefolakunmi Adenugba is my full name. And I'm an art advisor based in New York, and I help Black professionals in corporate spaces become art collectors.
For someone who is interested but don't have any background in the art world, would you say like just start and go to a museum? Like what's a good entry point?
Yeah, just go and just show up. Just because even when I think about how I started in art, it's literally just my parents taking me to art, and I just
Mhm.
grew a habit of just seeing art. And every everyone that's like knows art is because they always see art. Like you just need to keep seeing art. So if you want to be involved on a professional level in the art world, just keep showing up to exhibitions and things like that. If you want to be involved as a collector, just keep showing up to exhibitions and things like that because you're consistently refining your taste for art. You can pick out, okay, I really like this piece and why. I don't like this piece and why that is. You can say, oh, I know this is a really good piece of work. And you get to that point because you're always surrounding yourself or seeing art. And I think that's the best way to be attuned to what's happening in the arts community, the art world, and just in terms of quality of art that's being produced, you just need to keep seeing art.
I'd love to talk about what you mentioned about if you want to become a collector, because that seems, and this is how actually we first got
Yeah.
introduced. Um, One of our colleagues at Meta was mentioning there is this really amazing woman who is going around talking about investing in art. And me and my passion for investing, sort of general net worth, our mutual colleague was saying, you two should meet.
Yeah.
And just the thought of investing in art as a means of net worth growth was just so mind opening
Mm.
for me. I'd love to ask more about this because this preconceived notion that I had of art investment being a bit more of you need a certain level of wealth, you need certain level of taste. It's not something that you can jump right in.
Mhm.
Do you feel something similar in you need a certain level of XYZ status before you can become a collector?
No, I think you can start collecting whenever. An example is for my advisory ISE-Da, we have a new collectors program where we help people build art collections. And I always tell people that some of the most phenomenal collectors you will see and hear about in the industry were not buying work that was 100K immediately. Like everyone starts somewhere and you also grow with the artist. So an artist, maybe you purchase their work, maybe it's like $1,000. If they continue to do well in their career, their artwork can now be priced at maybe $30,000 and maybe like I don't know, 5 years, 10 years. You never know, right? So I always tell people like to not be afraid, but I think to be a good collector, you have to be attuned to what quality artwork is. It doesn't matter whether or not the artist is well known in the industry yet, but I think once you keep seeing art, like I said before, you kind of just get an idea like, okay, I'm really interested in seeing how this artist's work progresses over time and things like that. When it comes to investing in art, I'm always particular to say I encourage people to make cultural investments in art because there is no guarantee that the work that you buy is going to appreciate significantly in value. I think that there is so many different market forces, but there's some artists who, if you see their work, let's say on like the secondary market, they're doing extremely well. So maybe purchasing a work by this artist, you can say is an investment because you know that they have a really great track record in the secondary market and things like that. But for people who are just starting to collect, I would say collect what you buy, but also you can take your time with collecting if you're just starting out. You don't need to try and buy like 50 pieces in 1 year and things like that. You should really work to develop your taste, your understanding about art.
You mentioned something also about secondary markets.
Yes.
Um, when we talk about investing, I'm thinking of art as maybe if I think about my entire portfolio, maybe something like the alternative assets
Mm,
portion.
yes.
And if I think about it that way, like how would I buy, sell, and potentially think of this investment? Like,
So I when I think about secondary market is when, let's say, an artwork's already been sold to a collector and the collector wants to sell the artwork again. And there's like bidding and all of this that happens at an auction house and the artwork gets sold. I think, well, I know for an artwork to get to that point of selling, the artist is probably at a certain point in their career where they're very well renowned. There's like a great demand for their work past the primary market. And if you're a collector and you're getting to the point where you want to sell the work on the secondary market, you probably would have had that piece for maybe about 10 years in your collection. It's not something that's really quick. And in the art world, we typically like discourage people from trying to flip artworks to quickly buy it primary and flip it secondary because it's a lot. I think one of the things is that it's really different than like a stock or doing trading and things like that. Like this is a whole artist career that is, being built over time. So the longer you have something in your collection, the more beneficial it can be for the artist because you're really being a steward of their work. And that's why in our advisory we say we're trying to we focus on the cultural stewardship of Black contemporary art. It's really about holding a piece of art, what it's talking about, its narrative, the intention, and taking care of it and being responsible for it. And, maybe that does mean
mm,
in 10, 15 years you resell the work, but the primary motivation isn't a financial investment, but rather a cultural investment that could eventually grow into a financial investment. That's what we try and encourage people. And I think one of the things to realize is that an artist can do well in their career, which is beneficial for you, but it's also great if you're a collector who's killing it in your career as well. So that's why when I built this advisory, I was first going to kind of the people that I knew who were in corporate spaces, and which is why we brought our focus to corporate spaces and it's kind of expanding out of that. So these are like young Black professionals who are extremely influential in their circles. They're killing it in their full time jobs, working at top companies and things like that. You guys will actually be great ambassadors for art collecting in general, but you would make phenomenal art collectors, period. Because you're on a trajectory of really doing extremely well in your career. And the better you do in your career, the more influence you get and things like that, the more you can encourage people to see the value of supporting artists, especially Black artists. But also, the better it's going to be when people look at artists in your collection, like, oh, this person's collected this artist's work. Maybe I should take a look at their work and things like that. So, in our advisory, we always encourage the young collectors to build relationships with the artists because it's literally a mutually beneficial relationship. The artist can do well, and you can also do well in your career. So, it's not just banking on what the artist is doing. You've got to make sure you're on it, like from that point on as well, because you can really influence people to support this artist from the very beginning.
that is so cool.
Yeah.
It's a real sort of living dynamic
Yeah.
that you're building. Were all of these gravitational pulls the reason why you switched over from corporate back into art advisory?
I I love my corporate role. I think Black and Veatch, anyone who's in engineering listening to this, check out Black and Veatch. Big fan of the company. I had such a good time. It's an amazing company. Love the consulting division. I'm still close to a lot of people there to this day. But I think because I'm really passionate about art, I just felt that I was there for 2 years and I felt that if I was going to stay strictly in corporate any longer, I was not going to go back to the arts. And I just didn't want that to
Mm.
be my reality. So I said, okay, I'm going to move to the arts. I'm going to take a significant pay cut. I'm going to move to the most expensive city and go to New York and I'm going to try and make it work. And I was going to school and things like that. But I think it was just realizing that I had a really good job. I had a really good life. And I felt that I was going to become very comfortable with it, and it would make it hard for me to go and pursue what I was passionate about. So I said 2 years is long enough, and this is the earliest I should go before I get too comfortable.
The big tech culture, there is something called the golden handcuffs. And it's real. Like, once you get to a certain position in big tech, the harder it is to walk away from it,
Yeah.
even if there are feelings of other callings.
Hmm.
So, super kudos to you for following that gut feeling. But you make that big statement, you make that big jump into the unknown, and your net worth and career satisfaction continuously fall for
Yes.
the next. Was reality not what you thought it would be?
It was harder, I think. So at that time, I had a lot of things personally happen. And anyone that knows me knows that when it comes to my career, I'm a really type A person. So when I was preparing to go to grad school, I said I need to get this in check, this in line. And life happens, and that wasn't something that I was used to. I'm very much a, if I plan, it will work out. And it just so happened when I made the biggest move yet, things were not working out. So it was one a reality check for me to realize that I can plan as much as possible and things will go wrong, but it allowed me to learn how to be a lot more flexible with things and say, okay, I'm making this plan, but I know moving forward things can go wrong. What are my backups and things like that? So I had moved. I was loving my coursework and things like that, but there's a lot of personal things that were happening at the time, and I was just not happy. I then, let me think, 2019, so it was right before the pandemic. And if I'm honest, I was living in Long Island and my school was in Manhattan. I had a 2 hour commute each way. So I was
Oh.
absolutely exhausted. And I was also working at a gallery part time. So I was doing school, doing my homework, going to work. I was going to all these art events I had to go to network. So I was just beyond exhausted, and I had all this other personal stuff happening. So it was just a really tough time. But I was determined, said, if I left this amazing job, I have to make it work. So I said, okay, we have to figure it out. Like I said, I literally just do not have a choice. I made this big jump, so I've got to make it worth it. When the pandemic was about to start, things were getting slightly better. I got this really nice new part-time role. Loved it. The week after, everything shut down. So I moved
Hmm.
back to Atlanta and stayed with family. And I actually think, I think despite all the horrors that happened during the pandemic, for me, I didn't wasn't spending 4 hours a day commuting. So I had energy and I could really focus on, I launched my advisory at that time. So I could really focus on building it, making sure that people realized we weren't just a commercial venture, but we also really cared about the theory side of art. So we launched doing like educational projects on different art theories and things like that. It allowed me to kind of regroup internally and try and sort things out like in my personal life and things like this. I was able to study remotely and finish my degree remotely because school had shut down. So that actually really helped me out and is the reason why ISE-Da is how it is and where it is, because I was able to connect with artists from across the diaspora since everyone was at home. So I was speaking to historic members of like Afrocobra who helped, the Wall of Respect in Chicago, who were there in the 60s, who were traveling to Nigeria for Festac in 77 and meeting with all of these amazing artists like Fela Kuti and just hearing about their experiences and how being an artist has allowed them to live these really rich lives. I was meeting with artists in Colombia and we were talking about the similarities and differences between map making and textile making in West Africa and in Bogota, Colombia, and things like that. So I was able to make these really phenomenal cross diasporic connections just because everyone was at home during the pandemic. So I think my life satisfaction was definitely climbing at that point. Also, I think one of the hardest things for me is, like I said, I had a good job, so I was used to a certain standard of living and type of living, and that like completely dropped. So that definitely, I wasn't able to just go on vacation the way I did. So it was like a big life adjustment I think that I was going to I was going through, but I knew that I had this goal for the advisory.
That sounds like a fantastic experience, just being able to meet all these amazing historic and contemporary
Yeah.
figures, but totally with you in terms of money does matter to fulfill your dreams. We talked about this briefly about how equitable pay, or at least pay to be able to survive, is super important.
Very important.
What was the, I don't want to say wake up call, but like, how did you push through?
I'm really lucky to have a great community of people around me. So I was like living with family when I first moved to New York. When I moved back to Atlanta, I was staying with family, so that helped. Since I think a year into my job in the firm in the consulting division, I knew I was going to go back to the arts, and since I'd done internships and more in the arts, I understood what the pay was. So I started building a nest egg to make sure that I was good. And so I kind of prepared for that. And I think also that's part of the reason why I did my course part time and had a job, because I said there's just no way that I'm going to be studying and I'm not working and trying to make some sort of money while I'm in this career. So I think one of the things is sometimes I feel like in creative careers, it's really easy to get caught in we don't talk about money, it's just about passion. But the reality is people need money to survive. We literally live in a world where you can't not have a job to survive and give yourself a good standard of living. So I think I came into the art world with the mindset that I love art, I'm passionate about it. Anyone that speaks to me knows that. Like, it's literally undeniable. I've literally studied art my entire life. I'm going to grad school. They're very clear that I'm dedicated to this. I just also need to, if it's not for me, I just had to reject it. Because I think that in times like this, and especially like I had a great corporate job, I was used to a certain standard of living. I didn't want to get to a place where I just wanted to say yes to have a job and any job just so I had income. So I just had a really, once again, like flexible mindset. Okay, I'm going to do this part time job for this amount of time. So I understand this part of the art industry. I'll then transition to this. And, as you change jobs, your salary increases, like you have more experience. So you can ask for like higher rates and things like that. So I kind of went in with that mindset. And after graduation, I worked full time in an art gallery. And, I learned a lot in what the 5, 6 months I was there. But I think through that experience, I realized that art galleries weren't for me. And so I thought that was the end of it for me in the art industry. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go back to my corporate job. I like having a good standard of living. I don't want to do this anymore. But then I realized that I could just do it at the same time. Like, I was in school, I was studying, and I was working in these art roles, but I was also building my advisory. Like, why can't I do that with a full time job? And I was doing it while I was working at the gallery. I was doing things for my advisory after hours. So I think once again, it was just like a change of mindset that said being in the arts and being dedicated to arts and supporting Black people in the arts doesn't mean that I can't have a standard of life that I want. So what is it that I need to do to figure it out? I feel like at that point, there's so many things that people told me is not possible, and I just made it work. Like, oh, you can't do two majors in two completely different disciplines in college. I made it work. Oh, you can't do internships and going to college. I made it work. Like, everyone's telling me each step of the way this is not possible, and I was like, okay, I've got this far, so I can keep pushing it. So I was doing my advisory, and then I got my job at Facebook where I was working on their arts team. So once again, I'm surrounded by arts full time, but they allow me to do my advisory on the side. So I think from that point on, I just knew that this is something that I can do. And I
Mm.
think one of the things that was really great was having, my parents were the people that even got me involved in the arts from childhood. And when I would get offers or people saying, okay, we're going to give you the offer, but you can't run your business, they would even say, don't take it. And I'll be here like, okay, but I need a job. He said, another job will come. Jobs come and jobs go, but you should not quit the thing that you spent so many years and so much time and energy building just to have a job. So they were even like, just don't take it. This is not worth it. I think seeing that from my parents was like, okay, something's going to work out. And then I got a job at Facebook. So it literally worked out for the best. And even though I'm not at Facebook anymore, the job I have now at Orange Barrel Media, they know that I have my advisory and they are nothing but supportive. And they are also like, I'm on the arts team at that company. So I'm always surrounded by art. I can always talk about art. So I'm now in the mindset where like I know I can juggle these two things and do it really well. I can kill it at my full-time job. I can kill it in my advisory. It's just about being efficient. So when I wake up, my alarm wakes up, I can't afford to be there for an hour just scrolling through Instagram. Like I've got to get up and I've got to get stuff done. So I've become really good at like being efficient.
There's a point of this that I can empathize really well because, as you know, I
Yeah,
have my startup Winnie on the side.
yeah,
It's a community and app to empower women in tech with financial literacy, etc. Before joining Meta, I was working on Winnie full time.
mhm,
Things didn't work out, had to pay the bill, so joined Meta. And then a few things happened where I decided to give Winnie one more go.
yeah,
And in that process, so many people have been telling me because they see me working my butt off to do really well, exceptionally well on a really demanding full time job and then on my startup. Either why don't you try to take outside investment and try to do, the startup full time, or, it hasn't worked out so far. Why don't you quit, work on your just, full time job at Meta so that you're not so stressed out all the time? And I feel like your story is validating my experience in that, granted, it's super stressful. Granted, I feel like I'm always cash poor because I'm like investing all of my salary into my startup. But at the same time, I do feel this is like a valid third way.
yeah,
It like allows me to stay, exactly to your point, it allows me to stay independent while it gives me the time to properly vet and build
exactly,
this baby of mine in the way that I feel is respectful of my users and
exactly.
community. And I love the fact that you're saying you can kind of have the best of both worlds. It's not a typical path, but
Yeah,
it's a doable path.
yeah,
And it actually can be a win win for everyone.
yeah.
So let me ask about this. You join Meta.
Hmm.
It's this amazing experience where you're able to continue your work with ISE-Da and still have a pretty comfortable life.
Yeah.
But your life satisfaction plummets here.
So I really liked my job at Meta. I do such a bad job, Meta. But I that was the time where the layoffs were happening. So I think there was a lot of
Mm.
anxiety around, okay, what is going to happen? I loved what I was doing. I was working as the communications coordinator for Open Arts. And I was writing about art and looking at art. Like that's what I love to do with my day. So it was good, but I think the drop in life satisfaction, there was just so much uncertainty in the tech industry at that point. I think by that time I was just exhausted. Like I just gone through another serious
Mm.
and in-depth round of like job searching and interviewing. So it was just a big shock when that was happening. But I think, I love my job now. So I landed, on both feet, which is great.
Is your current role similar to what you had at Meta or different?
Similar in that I'm on the arts team, so I work at Orange Barrel Media, which is an out-of-home advertising media company, and our CEO is great. He's one of like the top collectors in the industry. Our office is just art everywhere, which is so nice to go into, and I love it.
I want to come back to this, but before that, what was your role at Meta in terms of what does a social media company have to do with art?
Okay, so our arts team, they would commission works by artists and it would be like site specific works on the walls of the different Meta offices globally. So you'd have some pretty phenomenal artists. Like I remember coming into the offices and like, they have this artist? Like, oh my goodness, like, a great. And I would tell my friends I knew before I started there, and I said, you're coming into work and seeing this artist, like I need you to go quick Wikipedia search or something and realize whose artwork that you're seeing on a daily basis. So they had this phenomenal program and it helps, boost employee wellness. And my role was to really help develop content that described the roles of the artists, like describe their work, create like, I guess, content posts and things like that to really help people understand the artwork that was in the offices that people were engaging with and things like that, and support some of the arts programming around the artwork that happened internally.
Fola, you are so cool. That role is so cool. This sounds amazing. I'd love it if you could share with us like how you juggle everything, given your advisory and then also your full-time role. If this was your 24 hours in a day of life of Fola.
I get up around like 5, 6, maybe an hour. An hour I will spend my advisory email to look at different things that are happening. I look at my texts and I'll just kind of start making a note of, I need to get back to this person with this. I need to do research on this. And then the other hour I'll get ready for my 9 to 5 and I'll leave the house around like 8. While I'm on the train, I'll respond to any texts from family, friends, and even like artists or other art advisors or people that I work with. So I'll try and do that while I'm on the train. And then around 9 to 5, I'll do my job, sometimes after hours, a bit longer, but definitely by 6:30, that's typically when I start going back to advisory things. So maybe I'm doing the newsletter, or the newsletter, maybe we'll have an event for our new collectors program. Yeah, 6:30 onwards is typically advisory stuff. Sometimes if there's anything I need to do for my 9 to 5 job, I'll be doing that then too. But one thing that really helps me is scheduling things. So for example, if I'm kind of up to date everything that I want to do, and I know, okay, I have an email that needs to go out to someone in 2 weeks, in 3 weeks, in a month's time, I'll write it and I'll schedule it out. So if I know that, let's say I'm trying to follow up with someone on a project we're working on or something, and I don't want to be annoying and follow up every 3 business days. So I said, okay, I'll give them like 2, 3 weeks. I'll write the email and I'll schedule it to go out 2 to 3 weeks. So I typically give myself an hour in the evening, probably right before I go to bed at like 10, 11, to just do things I need to schedule, like emails. I'll even schedule my texts because my phone allows me to schedule texts. So if I'm not texting people in the evening, I'll schedule texts to go out like either 8 a.m. or 1 p.m. And I spend my last hour of the day like scheduling things to go out at different times.
You have basically at this point reached a new level of career net worth and life
Yeah.
satisfaction. As we start to close out, would love to hear what's your vision for not only your advisory but yourself.
I think I just want to continue to see how good it can get. I think this is the happiest I've been on a personal, professional, financial, all of this stuff level.
Yay!
And yeah, like I'm just beyond happy. So I just kind of want to see, okay, like can I keep it going? Like what are things that maybe I can work on a personal level that can help me reach the new heights that I want to go to? And I think just it's shown me just being consistent and very mission driven is really the way forward for me.
For the folks that sometimes feel a bit lost in terms of passion or mission or like just joy in their life,
Yeah.
what do you think gave you a different edge to find your North Star?
I'm a really stubborn person. So I'm very like if I'm not having fun, like, am I meant to be doing this for the rest of my life? And I think that I actually believe that passion or mission doesn't have to manifest in a career. I think for me, it was something that was a cultural interest that developed into a hobby, into what I wanted to do. And it's kind of something that encompasses every area of my life. So it's a career, but it's more than a career. But you can have a mission that's strictly in your personal life or strictly in your career. It doesn't have to intersect everything. So I think just being open to possibilities is one thing. And I think that's what I was open for. And I think realizing that other people's paths aren't your path. Like I was in business school and I can say that I definitely felt less than, because all of my peers, they're like, yeah, I want to work at this company and I want to be at Goldman Sachs. And I was like, I want to be in the arts. Like I was stressed. I was really like I was so shocked. But I think I said, okay, I love art, I like business. How can I make this work for me? And I think being open to being flexible, being creative, being innovative, and understanding that even though everyone around you may be doing this, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do it, is a good way of staying open. Being open to expanding your life outside of what people expect you to, you're more likely to find fulfillment and what it is that you think you're meant to experience in life.
Thanks for sharing that. For the past several years, this has been a constant question that I've come back to because we spend so much of our lives at
Yeah.
work. It just feels a bit inefficient if my career is not aligned with, I don't want to say mission. That seems like, but for lack
Yeah.
of a better word, mission. So I really appreciate that refreshing perspective.
Thank you for having me.
This was fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing, Fola.